Hi, welcome to the poetry vlog. You'll notice that today I'm a little bit messy. I'm still in my workout clothes. I still have my hair up in a really messy high ponytail. I just came from boxing. We did functional patterns today through our Caro boxing as a guest workshop leader. And then I'm going to actually go on the lake next because it is beautiful outside. So honestly, I didn't feel like cleaning up. I'd rather just get this information out to you before I head out for the day. A couple quick updates on the poetry vlog if you've been following along to figure out what exact form this all will take. I mentioned last time that the vlog on YouTube in particular will be used to bring in guests. So we have two guests already lined up, my friends Patrick and Abby. So I'll be posting videos of them coming in and talking about their favorite poets. I also have a couple other friends lined up, Dustin Stevenson and Charlie. They're in LA, so they're going to FaceTime in. And we have a couple other people in the works where we're sorting out their guesting. So keep tuned for that. We're going to have people coming in and talking about their relationship to poetry and pop culture, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to start using that platform. The podcast is where most of the changes are going to happen. So I did some research, and I understand that like smart speakers are the way things are going right now, and you can ask for like flash briefings. So right now, if you go to the podcast, I read for 2 minutes or less from the poet, and then I launch into the discussion. It's so far just been transcribed from these YouTube videos. What it's going to change to is every day I'll do a 2-minute reading, and once a week I'll do a more elaborate podcast discussion. To make it easy for you to call those up on your speaker, I might actually also shift into having them be 2 different channels. So one will be Flash Briefing Poetry Pop Culture Edition, and one will be the Poetry Vlog Podcast Edition, but that's kind of complicated. So that's what I'm still sorting out. Thanks for your patience. If you've been checking out the podcast and you're a little confused about how they work, we'll get there. But the long version of a short story is basically what I'm doing. I'm not sure. Is that we're going to have a weekly, more extended podcast discussion, a weekly, more guest-related vlog post, and then daily poetry readings. And of course, if you ever want to just keep up with me on a day-to-day basis, I am on Twitter and Instagram. I'm a little less active on both of those than some folks, but I'm active enough that you're welcome to dip in and check out my life and chat with me there. So those are some updates on the poetry vlog. To summarize, I'm thinking that on Wednesdays specifically, I'll be posting a full vlog, usually with a guest, and then daily I'll be posting on the podcast 2-minute or less readings, and Mondays I'll be posting a longer lecture discussion from me. It's possible I'll add some extra ones in there as we go, but that'll be the minimum of what will be produced. And I'll be doing this for a year straight at least, so there's going to be a lot of content by this time next year, and I'm pretty excited about it. All right, today we're taking a more traditional poetry approach. Sorry, I'm only drinking hot chocolate and I'm really excited to go on the lake. So my friend Abby loaned me this book right here, Iteration Nets by Karla Kelsey. Right now, the sonnet is kind of going through a renaissance. This is partly because some major poets have been picking it up. Jericho Brown, for instance, and Denez Smith is another. So I'm going to actually give you a quick lesson on what the sonnet is, how to identify a sonnet, and maybe ways that you can use this if you're a lyricist. So if you write lyrics, the sonnet form is actually very music friendly because of the type of rhythm and rhyming patterns that it holds. And if you're someone who's just like, I don't know, my teacher made me learn what a sonnet is, you can kind of tune in and we'll see how this goes. Something I struggle with as a teacher is teaching rhythm. So I'm going to try a little bit today, and there's going to be some images with my voice behind them to explain how I'm doing this. But if you can't keep up, or if you're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, do not hesitate to comment below, email me, chat with me on my website, tweet at me, any of the forms that feel good to you. My goal, again, is for this to be increasingly interactive so I can be most of service to you as a resource. All right, so let's talk about Karla Kelsey. I keep wanting to say Kelsey Karla. I'm going to look at her website real quick because I don't have her information memorized. It was actually a new poet for me when Abby first introduced me to her book, and I was just so excited by even the very first sonnet. Some background on her is she has a conjoined book from Omnidon Press in 2014, Iteration Nets, someone we're going to be reading today, from Asata in 2010, and Knowledge Forms the Avery, also from Asata in 2006. She has experimental essays of Sphere. She has a bunch of awards from Fence Books Online and all sorts of other journals. So she's actually really established. I was surprised I hadn't heard of her, a little bit chagrined as it may be. But I really love this book so far. Truthfully, I'm not done with it yet. That's one of my goals with going down to the lake today. I'm going to go for a swim and then sit on the edge of it and finish this book because I promised Abby I'd get it done so I can get it back to her. We did an exchange. But today I'm going to read the very first sonnet And then I'm going to talk about what type of sonnet it is, and I'll show you my notes, which briefly sketched out how to read sonnets and how to also mimic the form for your own music making or for your own poetry writing. My students had a love-hate relationship with writing sonnets. Some of them are like, oh, I get this, and it really helps me with my music work, because a lot of them were into music and hip-hop and rap. Some of my students were like, why do we have to learn a form? This is not a Shakespeare class, right? So you can take or leave it as you wish, but feel free to ask me questions if my explanation leaves you with some. All right, so the first one is just 1.1. The underlining, you're going to actually get a picture of this poem for yourself. It's actually from my friend Abby. It's not my underlines, as a heads up. All right. And suddenly we were in it, and it was snow. Flesh in liquid, skin in shreds. Lush has been wicked, sinned when dreads end lovingly demure limits. Sandlit wars, no lands thundering. He heard, whims met, handed love slows, less insipid linen beds. Death and quickness limit, wed unendingly, reword, win it candid below, folding, unfolding, end slaking to drown near the rocks. Land burns. I find, then compensate missed revolution. There had been a little town scolding, cajoling, and shaking around in its box. Stand firm, my mind, and concentrate with resolution. Bear sad hymns, a brittle down. Promise you none of you understood that. I don't either, and we're going to talk with Patrick actually later this week on Thursday about the beauty of poetry and pop culture music for being unintelligible, and why the relief you'll find with poetry and when you'll start enjoying it more genuinely is when you realize that it's when you don't totally get it and in a logical sense, but you emotionally and physically kind of get it and you can't put your finger on it, that it's most powerful. And I really believe that, and we're going to dig into that a lot over the next week or two. For now, I chose this poem because I think it's gorgeous. I love reading it. I could read it over and over again out loud. I recommend you find language where you feel that way, where you can read it all out because of the sounds and the way your body moves when you try to read it. And we can talk another time about the ableist and notions that are in what I just said. But for now, I want you to think about that. What would you enjoy reading? What feels good to read out loud, right? And part of what makes this feel good to read out loud is the fact that it's in sonnet form, and this is where it becomes useful for your songwriting. So I'm going to try a new editing technique where I'll have the images pop up. But for now, while you guys are looking at the images there, I'll be looking at them in front of me as well to explain to you how I know that this is a sonnet. Right? So the first thing you want to do is you look for the rhyme scheme, meaning you look for the words that rhyme at the end and you label them according to whether or not they rhyme. So when you look at this, you can see that snow, no, slows, below, all rhyme. We can talk about types of rhyme another time. For now, just for the sake of this exercise, they rhyme. We'll label those rhyming patterns A at the end of each line. Then we see shreds, dreads, beds, wed. Also kind of rhyme. So we'll label those B, right? This is where things get weird though. You're like, wait a minute, rocks and revolution and town don't rhyme. So you label them so accordingly, C, D, E. But then box does rhyme with rocks, so C again. Resolution rhymes with revolution, D again. And then town rhymes with down, E again. This is actually not the most popularly circulated form of a sonnet. So if you'll notice the next image that comes up, and don't worry about all of the drawings on it yet, we know that this is what's called a Petrarchan sonnet. We know it's a Petrarchan sonnet because the rhyme scheme is 2 octaves, meaning 2 sets of same rhymed lines that count to 8. So abba, abba, 4 and 4, 8. It's an octave with what's called a sestet, which is basically 6, right? So CDE, CDE is a sestet. And then 6 plus 8 is 14. So your first hack is, sonnets are always 14 lines, if they're Shakespearean or Petrarchan, right? So if you say, okay, there's 14 lines, it's probably a sonnet. You can even start there instead of with the rhyming pattern, right? 14 lines, let me go check out the rhyme scheme and see if this is a sonnet, right? So 14 lines, it's a sonnet. Abba, abba, CDE, CDE means it's Petrarchan. If it was ABA, right away I'd be like, well, maybe this is a Shakespearean sonnet, not a Petrarchan, right? Those are the ones you'll see most often. But this one's a Petrarchan, which I think is kind of cool. I actually prefer Petrarchan because the rhyming is so tight in a way that really does it for me. Another thing, I'm just scratching the surface of how to identify sonnets, but as a sidebar, usually a sonnet is considered the perfect form for an argument. In a Shakespearean sonnet, the last two lines are a rhyming couplet that resolves the argument. And in the middle, when you have that break in the rhyming pattern into the next scheme, is usually when there's what's called a volta, or a shift in the argument, or a change in tone. But that's going deeper into sonnet theory. We're not going to deal with that today. Today we're just dealing with the general idea of the form, right? So the next way that you then identify the form is you can see if not only did they rhyming-wise comply, right, with the octave and the sestet for a Petrarchan sonnet of 14 lines, but we can look at how they rhythmically played it out. So this is the part where students get really hung up. And this is the part where after you listen to this, you're like, I still don't know what the hell you're talking about. Then I would really ask you to go ahead and reach out to me because I want to learn how to teach this better. I think sometimes when we know something internally, it's harder to teach it, right? But sonnets are traditionally in what's called iambic pentameter. I know, now we're getting all Latin. But an iamb is simply a da-da, 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 da-da. That's an iamb. It's soft up, soft up, soft up. Pentameter means 5, so it means 5 of those. That's all that an iambic pentameter really is. We could also go into iambic pentameter theory. At the time, it was like, this is the natural pattern of speech, which is also racist, classist, Eurocentric, and all these other things. We're not going to break that down today. That's generally what you're looking for, right? And deeper into sonnet theory, once you, what's called scanned the poem and found where all of the stresses lie, and you see deviations, which you're seeing probably with this particular image that I've put up again and again. There's one in it and it, right? Those subtle variations oftentimes carry meaning because they're subtle variations, right? So it's a beautiful way, both in music writing and in poetry writing, to use rhythm and stresses to help emphasize or modify or accentuate or create meaning in the body because the rhythmic patterning of your speech changes with it. So the way I scanned this is actually arguable, right? And the way I recommend going into it first is you see all those dashes that I've made? The first thing I did was mark those, which is basically the stresses. And I go like this, and suddenly we were in it, and it was snow. And suddenly we were in it, and it was snow. Now, this is a stretch. I was looking for 5 stresses. This is where rhythm can come in really handy for you too, because if you have readers who are looking for a sonnet, you can be like, I want them to emphasize this syllable. I'm inclined to emphasize we here because I'm looking for an iamb and I'm looking for that 5 feet of stressing. So, and suddenly we were in it and it was snow. And suddenly we were in it and it was snow is not quite the same, right? I unstressed the we. So this is where we could have a lot of fun debating it because who cares? It's just poetry. You don't have to be perfectly right, but you get the idea. Right? If you'll notice, I also kind of slurred some words together, right? Technically, suddenly is 3 syllables. I just said suddenly and brought them together to emphasize and make it into 2 iambs, right? I go back afterward and I mark with a little U everywhere that there wasn't a stress. And then I go in and I create metrical feet, meaning the spaces of unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress. You'll see in the middle, we're not going to go into what it's called because I don't want to confuse you today. There's one foot that's unstressed, unstressed, stressed, right? So we could then spend time interpreting why it would be that way, right? Or you could argue with me that like actually that's the more normal like style of rhythm in this because I shouldn't have put an emphasis on we and I should have added syllables back in under suddenly. That would be a worthwhile argument to have. I actually don't feel very firm about how I scanned this. I did it this way for the purposes of making the sonnet clear. Something I learned when teaching. This is how I taught the form. I really messed it up. My students were just like, what the hell is she talking about? You're probably thinking the same thing right now. So I would recommend that you take the opposite approach of how I tend to do it. Instead, I would mark out every syllable. And suddenly we were in it and it was snow, right? And then go in and every 2 syllables draw a line, and then go in and see where the stresses fall and mark those, and then go in and put the unstresses and then see what you have. And then I might do a demonstration of this again in a week or 2, right? But the idea with that is you have your feet already set up, you've already figured out where the syllables lie, so you're done with that, you don't have to worry about it, and then you just tap the table whenever you see a stress or feel stress. It takes a little bit of practice. Eventually this will be really easy for you. It's not going to be easy right away. Right? So, and suddenly we were in it and it was snow. And suddenly we were in it and it was snow, right? So that is iambic pentameter. That's how you identify a sonnet. That's how you identify a type of sonnet. We're not going into the history of it. I think I'm at 15 minutes, so I want to try to wrap it up. I've given you 2 different techniques for approaching it, and I want to really emphasize that this is associated with like Shakespeare and like high poetry and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about that. Think about this instead. If you're interested in pop culture, music, hip hop, there's a good book actually that we'll talk about later called Rhymes Challenge by David Kaplan, Caplan, right? Where these types of forms are actually used repeatedly right now in like hip hop and rap and musical lyrics, because if you can figure out where we tend to place our emphasis and our rhythm, and if you can get a rhythm through that, you're going to have more emotionally impactful poetry oftentimes, as well as impactful songwriting. If you can also learn how to identify like having the same sort of general metrical feet before you have your rhymed word at the end, you can start having a more consistent rhythm for your readers to follow along. Poetry had rhyme and rhythm to help with memorization because it predates written text, and this was how stories were passed on. Rhyming, rhythmic patterns that you knew where things were supposed to be so you could memorize it more easily. The same goes for pop lyrics. It's the same thing. So if you're like someone who likes to try writing like hip hop music lyrics or rap music lyrics, or just general song lyrics, and sometimes it just sounds kind of clunky and you can't figure it out, try going back to the basics of iambic pentameter, for instance, and just see if you have like the roughly same number of stresses per line. This poem doesn't actually stick with it very well at all. And we're not talking about that today, right? There's all these deviations within it. And that's totally cool, but then you know that you're doing it on purpose, and it can help with kind of creating that tension for your reader instead of it being like, I want it to sound rhythmically tight and I can't get it to sound rhythmically tight. So that's today's micro lesson. It's much more formal than a lot of the other ones we've done, but in a weird way, it's the least formal because it's the most practical for these intersections between poetry and pop culture. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, this is one of the last podcasts that are just transcribed from blogs. I'll still do it occasionally. But this one's also harder to follow along with just by sound. So I'd really encourage you, if you're like, I still kind of want to get it and I didn't, tune into the YouTube video. Those of you who are here on the YouTube video, let me know what I could have done to make this a little bit more transparent and clear. And we'll keep returning to these kind of ideas throughout it. And that's about it. So remember, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, visit my website, reach out to me, leave comments below, check out the podcast and give me your thoughts. It'll be available soon on iTunes and other platforms besides just Anchor.fm. And I'm looking forward to continuing to develop this platform with you because it's exciting, if nothing else, to get to read and write about poetry and pop culture. All right, have a wonderful day. I know I'm going to out on the lake. Bye.